What's the Coalition's net migration target?
Well, we will have a bit more to say about it. We obviously, in the budget in reply a couple of years ago, made very clear that we would reduce permanent migration. Today we're announcing that we're going to significantly reduce foreign student numbers. They're obviously two of the primary components of net overseas migration. I think I can fairly easily say, Andrew, it's going to be significantly lower than Labor, but the precise net overseas migration number will be announced in due course. It will be lower because we've been very clear from the start, Andrew. We don't subscribe to Labor's Big Australia policy. Labor didn't take that to the last election. They didn't front up and look Australians in the eye and say, we want to bring in more than 1 million people over 2 years. So they don't have the approval of the Australian people to do that. And we've unfortunately suffered the catastrophic consequences as a result. We've announced in relation to housing $5 billion to fast-track 500,000 homes, just like the homes you can see behind me around our country in greenfield sites, and we're going to do that by funding the critical infrastructure that gets them moving. We're going to give first home buyers access to up to $50,000 of their own super to put towards a deposit to get into a home, and then requiring them to put that back into super at the end when they sell. We're going to ban foreign buyers and temporary residents from purchasing property so they're not competing with Australians, and of course we're going to reduce the demand, the foreign demand for housing by drastically reducing the number of foreign students and of course what we've announced with the permanent migration as well.
All right, the government says net migration is going to fall to 220,000 over the forward estimates. Are you saying your net migration figure will be significantly lower than that?
I think it's fair to say on any way you look at it, Andrew, our net overseas migration will be lower than Labor, and the precise number will be announced by Peter Dutton. But you can't believe a thing that Labor says on these. If you look at every budget and every MyEFO over their duration in government, Andrew, you understand this yourself, they've missed those targets. So it's one thing to set a target, but when you're missing those targets by hundreds of thousands, which they have cumulatively, then those targets mean nothing. It's what you actually deliver at the end. So we don't believe Labor's targets because they failed on every target. And one of the reasons we know they've failed on their targets is they've brought in more than 1 million people over 2 years. That far exceeds their targets. So we don't put any faith in any so-called targets going forward because they have shown habitually that they can't meet them.
Well, you mentioned some of your housing policy, superannuation for first home buyers to buy property, infrastructure fund, cut to migration, ban on foreigners buying homes. Is there another housing policy in the wings for the Coalition? And will that be on the supply side or the demand side?
Andrew, we'll have more to say about housing between now and election day, I can assure you. We are the party of home ownership. There's no doubt about it. Labor is very happy for Australians to rent for their whole lives. In fact, if one looks at Labor's policies over the last 3 years, you would say actually their intention is to turn Australians into lifelong renters. We think if Australians want to have that opportunity of home ownership, they should have it. As you have just recounted, there's a suite of policies, both on the supply side that are going to help, but also that can support first home buyers as well. We'll have more to say, I think, on both a supply and demand side that's going to support more houses into the market. We've got to build more homes, there's no doubt about it. Under Labor, we've built fewer homes and perversely brought in more migrants. We know what needs to be done in order to build more homes because we work very closely with the industry. Labor works against the industry because Labor works with the CFMEU, who fights the industry every step of the way. Labor's answerable to the CFMEU, and it's Australians who pay the cost of that. The CFMEU, essentially a criminal organisation, a criminal enterprise. So those costs are borne by end consumers.
So there'll be more for first home buyers.
Say. I promise you, Andrew. I promise you there will be more to say on home ownership and on housing more broadly from the Coalition between now and election day, even though I think it would be fair to people to look at the vast suite of policies we put in place. Ordinarily that would be a really big agenda to take into an election, But notwithstanding that, there will be more to say, I can assure you.
Because it sounds like you got something more in the wings for first home buyers. Would you be looking at anything like the John Howard policies of first homeowner grants or stamp duty exemptions or anything of that nature?
Andrew, you're one of the best in the business, and you have to ask those questions. Obviously, I'm not going to disclose what further announcements we may have between now and election day. But I think Australians have seen from us we are committed to helping Australians enter the housing market. We're not willing to have a generation of Australians unable to own their own home, which is where Labor's driving us. That's why we have announced such a broad suite of policies and why we look back at what we've done in the past, supporting first home buyers, which is why we had more first home buyers than Labor's had. We had more homes built, more homes started, more home approvals, lower rents. All of those things led to better housing choices for Australians. After 3 years of Labor, that has deteriorated very rapidly. So again, to come back to today's announcement, we don't agree with Labor's Big Australia policy, and that's why we will significantly reduce foreign students to take pressure off housing.
On housing, you've announced capacity for first home buyers to use $50,000 of their superannuation to buy property, as I just mentioned. But won't that drive up prices?
Well, no, because, Andrew, what we are doing is we are putting in place a suite of policies that all work together. They hang together. These are not independent, separate policies that are all just floating out in the breeze. We have a calibrated plan. So when I say we're going to bring on 500,000 new homes through our housing infrastructure program, I promise your viewers, this is not one of those Labor promises that isn't worth the paper it's written on. We've done the work. We have consulted with hundreds of councils who are sitting on these projects that are ready to go. They just don't have the funding to build the sewerage, the water infrastructure, the roads to actually make them happen. But if they get that money, those 500,000 homes can happen very quickly, and that's a very conservative number. We could have chosen a bigger number, but we like to under-promise and over-deliver, unlike the Labor Party, who's promised 1.2 million homes, yet they're going to fall hundreds of thousands of homes short. So all of these things hang together. If we bring in more supply, particularly in greenfield sites, which tends to be the province of first home buyers, Andrew, then what you're doing is you're releasing that pressure cooker environment that we've got now, where we've got fewer homes being built and more migrants coming in.
What's your reaction to this 30% household battery subsidy that Labor is offering? Will you offer something similar? Will you look to provide a bigger subsidy?
Well, as Peter Dutton has just said, it seems to be an admission from the Labor Party that prices are going up even more. We know Anthony Albanese promised on 97 occasions that Australians would get a $275 energy reduction. In fact, rather than going down by $275, prices have gone up by $1,300. And essentially what Anthony Albanese seems to be saying is, because energy prices are going to be so high, we will give some people who can afford $10,000 for a battery, some people will allow them to get off the grid, presumably because he's suggesting that energy on the grid is going to be exponentially higher.
Will you have a similar offer?
I think it's
because there's been reports you're developing similar policy.
I think Andrew, that's really ultimately a question for Peter Dutton or the Shadow Minister. I'm responding to what I've seen today and what I've read today, just like you have in the papers from the Labor Party. And it just seems to me that it's an admission that prices are going up. And I think that's a really scary thing for Australians, not only at a household level, but let's remember the 30% more we're paying in the supermarkets, Andrew, all of that is partly compounded by the higher energy prices being paid on the farm, in the distribution, in the cool rooms, all the way through the supply chain. So if prices are going up for us at home, imagine what it's going to do to our goods, and imagine what it's going to do to small businesses. We've already got 29,000 that have closed. I think it's a huge admission of failure.
Michael Sukkar, just a couple of other things I want to ask you about before we finish up here. Port of Darwin, do you concede the coalition stuffed that up in the first place by allowing the sale?
Well, Andrew, what I will say is that I think it's great leadership from Peter Dutton to step forward and do what's in our country's best interests in a thoughtful, calibrated way, not a desperate last-minute phone call into a local radio station, but in a really calibrated and thoughtful way. Strategic assets such as that, I think most Australians would agree, should be in Australian hands or similar. No doubt, Andrew, it's righting an error from the past. But again, the world has changed, and I think the geopolitical environment has got tougher. It's got more unpredictable. So it's partly a reflection of that.
Do you concede comparisons between Donald Trump and Peter Dutton are hurting you in this campaign?
I don't know, Andrew. I mean, I think in the end, there's no doubt that Donald Trump's pretty omnipresent in politics around the world at the moment. I think ultimately Australians are more focused on bread and butter issues that they're dealing with on a daily basis. I don't think anyone can credibly make a case that the Liberal Party of Australia represents particularly that form of republicanism. So, look, I'll leave it up to commentators. I think what is potentially being heard and felt out there, though, is that now's not the time for Australia to have a weak leader like Anthony Albanese, a very weak leader who can't be trusted to stand up for Australian interests. Not because he may not want to, but because I just don't think he's got it in him. He's a weak leader.
All right. Finally,
I think that's ultimately what people are seeing.
Finally, Michael Sukkar, we've seen this incident involving Peter Dutton and the footy and the cameraman after Mr Albanese fell off stage. A dangerous business, the campaign trail, isn't it?
Yes, Andrew. If I get out of here in one piece, I'll be very happy. I saw Gaith this morning. He's in good spirits, the cameraman involved. So, look, as long as we all live to tell the story, that's the main thing.
Indeed. Michael Sukkar, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.